Hello and welcome. Do you want to know how to increase your conversion rate when pitching to clients? Then you're in the right place. Because today we are going to look at the 3 most common mistakes that entrepreneurs make when pitching to potential clients. Now, when I say pitching, I might mean a full pitch for a large project or a contract. It could also relate to doing your networking pitch. So at a networking event, whether that's digital or face-to-face, creating a networking pitch that is engaging and will increase clients' interest in you as an individual and your product or your service. So getting good at pitching is a really important part of being an entrepreneur. So before we dive into those 3 major mistakes, we're going to have a look at why we need to get better at pitching. Because once we know why we need to get better at pitching, it is much, much easier to stay with the process of getting better at it, even when it feels a little bit stretchy or a bit challenging. So why do we need to get better at it? Well, number 1, we are commercial businesses. I know that you're a heart-centered person. If you're watching my videos, you will have a heart-centered business. You will be trying to create ripples in the world by doing what you do and create those for your clients. But at the end of the day, you're a commercial enterprise. You are there to make money. And creating a pitch or a presentation to a client, even the most simple one, takes time and energy and, money, essentially, because it is your time. So we don't want to be spending huge amounts of time preparing for these presentations or pitches, then going and doing them and then not winning the business, because it's not very commercially effective, and it also can be a bit demoralizing. If that happens a few times over, it can get a bit demoralizing. Now, it's important to recognize that clients say no to us for multiple reasons. If it's an individual, often they're saying no to themselves rather than saying no to us. If it's an organization, there could be other things going on in the organization. Procurement have had a say in what they can and cannot buy. There might be other budgetary constraints that are going on within the business. There may be other projects that are competing for time and energy and money. Things change in commercial organizations all the time. So they could be saying no to you for 100 different reasons, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with you, your product, or your service. However, it doesn't always feel like that when we're on the receiving end of the no. So if we have a couple of no's in a row, it can change our energy around pitching, and we spending lots of time working on the pitch, on the deck, making sure that's perfected. We will start to think about our costing, and sometimes there's a temptation to think, well, maybe I need to reduce my cost. If people are saying no, it's probably because it's too expensive. All those kinds of things can start to get really muddled up in our thinking, and we can get a little bit grippy around presenting. So we really want this to work. We really want the client to say yes to this. And we take in that kind of, I really need a yes this time energy if we've had a couple of no's in a row. So the clients will pick up on that. They will feel like it's quite salesy rather than it's a conversation. And they won't get a good feeling about us when we're pitching. So if we get better at converting, we'll get more yeses, fewer no's. That doesn't mean you aren't going to get no's. You will get no's, but you'll get fewer of them, and it's easier to bounce back afterwards. Another reason that we really need to get good at pitching is to do with word of mouth. So, I know before a client comes to see you, comes to ask you to prepare a presentation or a pitch for them, they will have done their due diligence. They will have read all the socials that you have put out there. They will have looked at your YouTube channel if you have one. They will have watched your social videos. They will have looked at your website. They will have read your testimonials. They'll have done all of those things before they ask you to come and pitch to them. So they've done their due diligence. Now, they'll also probably have rung around and asked other potential clients or old clients what you were like to work with. So what we want to make sure is that your digital version of you matches up with the real version of you, so that the sort of social polished version of you turns up in the office and is able to present in the way that you appear on your website and in your social media, on your social media platforms. Because if there's a miscongruence, if there's a misalignment between those two things, it can feel really clunky for the client, and they're like, oh, you're not who I thought I was. And then therefore they make that connection with the products, like, oh, well, maybe the product isn't what I think it's going to be, or the service isn't what I think it's going to be. And they start to second guess themselves. So we need to make sure that your digital reputation and the reputation that you create in the moment of being in the room and the word of mouth is all congruent, is all making sense. But the final reason, and I think one of the most important reasons why we need to get good at this pitching process, is we work really hard. As entrepreneurs, we work hard. We care about our business. We care about our clients. We care about doing a good job. And we want to do ourselves and our product or our business, our service, we want to do it justice. So it's awful to walk away from those situations and think, oh, I should have said this, or I didn't do that, I didn't respond to that in the right way, or I could see they didn't get what I was talking about on this bit. It's horrible to walk away from these scenarios and kind of go, oh, I wish I had. And we feel like we haven't done either ourselves or the product or service that we're selling justice. So being able to get good at this it really helps build your confidence as an entrepreneur. It demonstrates your expertise to clients. It gives you a really sort of positive energy when we're going into these scenarios. Yeah, we're good at this. We're good at having conversations with people. And that's what we want it to feel like. Pitches should really be conversations, not a download of information. They can get that in a digital space. So when you're there, we really want to be having this conversation. So those are all the reasons why we really need to get good as entrepreneurs at pitching ourselves, our products, our business, our service. But what are the 3 things that I see entrepreneurs commonly doing that make this harder and that doesn't need to be? So the first thing that I see is over justifying. And I have to say that I see this more in female entrepreneurs than I see it in male entrepreneurs. I see it also in business, just in corporate environments. I will see more justification from female presenters than I will from male presenters. And part of that comes from a sense of not feeling like we're quite enough. So we have to kind of over justify why we have a space in that room to talk about our product. And the way that this plays out is that we start to tell people about our expertise rather than demonstrate it. And one of the absolute classic ways of this is we start with I. So I could use myself in this example. So I trained as a speech and language therapist in Leeds. I worked in the health service for many, many years. I moved over and moved over to a startup. I stayed there for 10 years and I became the operations director. So what's the most common word there? I have done this. I have done that. I have done the other. Where is the client in all of this? The client is somewhere over there. They're not part of this conversation. This is a download. This is where you are telling your listeners why you are an expert and why they should listen to you. But actually it bears nothing. It has no relationship to where they are and what they want at this point. And I heard many, many years ago, I heard this lovely kind of metaphor for when we're using I at the beginning of a presentation. Every time you say the word I, you are actually taking a step towards the door. So if you say I 5, 6, 7 times in the opening parts of your presentation or your pitch, you're pretty much out the door. So your clients are over here and you've moved outside. So we really want to try to avoid using the word I at the beginning. Now, it doesn't mean we don't use it later on, and we might need to. But at the beginning, saying, I've done this, I've done that, I want to tell you about my company, how long we've been in business, what an amazing team they are. All of that has no relationship to where the client is, to their pain, to their difficulty, to their issues. It's really all about you. Now, as I said, they've probably done their due diligence. They probably know all this. They don't need you to repeat it at the beginning of a pitch. And I often see people saying, we've been in business for this many years. We have these types of clients. We have these people on our team and they've come from all these incredible places as well. And again, it's not really relevant to the client at that point. And as I say, they probably already know this because they've done their due diligence. So we're just repeating things. There's a line from Hamlet from Queen Gertrude says this when she's watching a play. So it's a play within a play. And she says, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks." And this is what I see with entrepreneurs sometimes. We are protesting. We are trying to over-justify why we're the right person to be talking about this. And it's, as I said, the difference here is that we are telling people that we're the expert rather than demonstrating our expertise by talking about different things, by talking about how we've solved problems for other clients, how we could solve the problem for this particular client. So don't protest too much. Don't start with yourself. Don't start by talking about why your team is the most amazing team on earth. You can come to that later on, and it absolutely, definitely needs to be there, but not at the beginning. Because it's a bit like beating your client around the head saying, "We're really good at this. No, we're really, really good at this. No, we're really..." It doesn't work the first time. It isn't going to work the 7th, 8th or 9th time that you do it. So don't push your expertise on the clients. Show your expertise, demonstrate your expertise through the other things that you talk about. Because this is necessary. So using logic, using data, it's absolutely necessary, but not at the beginning. We can come back to the data as a supporting part of your pitch later on. Because this is the second mistake that I see people make, is that they don't start with the heart first. So, excuse me, I'm going to cough. One moment. So we start with the data. We start with justification. Or actually, where we really should be starting is with the heart of the presentation. So that by the heart of the presentation, what I really mean is we need to start with stories. Now, that might be the story of where the client is. That might be the story of the current status quo. If the problem that the client has is more global, it's an external problem that is creating this issue for them, then we need to be telling that story and telling the story of how this is impacting on them. So we're showing that we've really listened to them in our pre-proposal stages, our pre-pitching stages. We've done our research. We really understand what their marketplace looks like, what their particular issue is, and how that's impacting, and how that is causing them discomfort, and where they would like to be, where they would rather be, and maybe looking at where that fits in with the rest of the marketplace as well. So whether they're different or the same as everybody else, but doing that through story, through case studies, through news articles, so that we're telling a story rather than presenting data. That way, human beings have this really interesting ability to absorb stories in this very kind of whole way, because that was how we communicated. Before we had writing, before we had any way of passing information on, we told stories, and that's how we learned. And we still have that ability to kind of digest a story whole. You know, stories essentially have been around for millennia. PowerPoint's been around for about 20, 30 years. It's really not a long time. So our brains are much more able to absorb, digest a story. So we really want to be starting with a story, a client story that is going to really help the person that's listening understand who we are, how we work, the process that we work through, and the kind of results that we get for clients. So we're really telling these lovely stories that make sense to our clients, because stories are 22% more memorable than facts. But more importantly than that, stories help us start to care. Right? We really care about what's happening. And if we care, we are much, much more likely to take action. Now, clients that I've worked with over the years are a little bit cautious about stories. Case studies, okay, I can talk about a case study, but stories in and of themselves, they find a little bit more challenging, because stories tend to have emotion in them. They tend to be quite emotional, and we want to try and stay away from emotion at work, because that's not something that's highly rated in the workplace. So rather than thinking about stories being emotional, I always say to clients, think about it being emotionful. So it's got emotion in it, because if a story has emotional content, then your clients will become engaged. They'll start to care about this situation. And if they care, they start to take action. Nobody takes action over a great spreadsheet. Nobody takes action over logical data. I promise you they don't. They take action because the story compelled them and then the evidence supported that. So we do need that evidence that I spoke about, that over-justification that happens at the beginning of a pitch. We do need it, but we don't need it until after the story. So we start with the heart and then we support with the logic. Now, the other thing that I see happening in pitches, and it's around this sort of emotion idea, this story idea, is that we use very sensible and sophisticated language. So we try to sound clever. And actually, what we really need to be doing at this point is using sensory language. So sensory meaning anything that is going to evoke the senses, literally. So sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. So using words that really engage your listener rather than kind of boring, flat business words that are better for reading rather than listening to. So using sensory language is one part of the emotion aspect that I see missing often. So lack of story, lack of sensory language. And if there is story, it's kind of contained in a very sterile case study. There isn't enough emotional content in there. And if you think about it, human beings like to think that they're super rational, right? You like to think you're super rational, but have you ever bought a house or a car? Did you make a rational decision about that? You know, a house is the most expensive thing any of us are going to buy. And when I say house, I mean, you know, flat, whatever it was, a home. It is the most money you will ever spend. And I can guarantee that you probably walked into a place that on paper didn't look right. On paper, it was probably not quite the right location. Maybe it wasn't the right price. Maybe it needed a lot more work than you were ever planning to do. All those kinds of things. But I can guarantee you would have walked into that space and kind of gone, oh, this feels good. Or you will have had the opposite, where you have maybe on paper, this thing looked amazing, right location, right price. You know, it was the state of the place was how you wanted it. So it was either a do or upper, or it was perfectly done so you could move in. On paper, it looked amazing. And you walked in and you felt nothing. You see, we make these decisions emotionally and then we rationalize afterwards why it was a good decision. So we need the stories, we need that sensory language in order to get our clients, our listeners to care about what we're talking about, to care about fixing it as quickly as possible, to care about fixing it with us through our process. And then we can use the data and the evidence to support it. So those are the first two mistakes that I see people making. So what's the third? The third is really super common. So often clients will come to me and say, I'm doing this really important pitch. Can you look at the deck? And say, yeah, sure, I can look at the deck. What is the deck going to tell me? And what I realize and what they realize while we're having this conversation is that they've spent a huge amount of time preparing the deck. So there'll be some amazing slides and they will be full of information and they won't be the presentation, because at this point, you know, we have to have that conversation with our clients and say, actually, it's you're the presentation, you are the pitch. They buy you, then they buy what you're offering. So your deck could be the most beautiful deck in the world. It could be just incredibly gorgeous, but it isn't going to make the difference because it's just an audio visual support. You're the presentation. So the big problem here is that people have thought about what they're going to say. So it might be scripted, it might have this beautiful deck, but they have not thought about how they're going to say it, how they are going to be in the room. They haven't thought about what their intention is in this pitching place. Are we presenting? Do we want this to be a conversation? Are we trying to inspire them into huge action? Are we trying to make them feel like this is a safe, secure decision? They haven't thought about their intentions. They haven't thought about how they need to be in order to fulfill those intentions. So when they go into that pitching space, haven't thought about body language. They haven't thought about whether they're going to sit or whether they're going to stand or how they're going to move in that space. They haven't thought about what their body language is telling the client. They haven't thought about how they're going to gesture and support everything that they're talking about by using really clear, really concise gesture. They haven't thought about how they're going to use their voice. So what their intonation is going to be like, whether that's going to stay kind of flat, whether that's going to go up and down. They haven't thought about how they're going to pace or pause their information so that it feels conversational, even if they're the only person talking. And they most certainly haven't thought about breathing. And breathing is really, really critical part of all of that. It's very hard to pace or pause if you're not breathing effectively. It's very difficult to breathe well if you haven't thought about how you're standing. And if you don't stand well and breathe well and you're feeling a little bit nervous, then you're likely to get a little bit of a shake in your voice. And that will demonstrate to your listeners, to your audience, that you're not quite as in control and you're not quite as calm as you could be. So this is the third and probably the most critical mistake that I see entrepreneurs make, is they don't think about how they, as an individual, as a person, or as a team of people, are going to turn up and own that space, own that conversation, own their expertise, own the service or product that they are offering as a solution to the client's problem. And it's a really, really important part because, as I said, they will buy into you first of all, and then your product or your service. So again, it comes to this idea of matching up, this misalignment idea, is that if your social presence and if your website look incredible, and then you turn up and you're nervous and anxious, and that's demonstrated in your body language, your breathing, your voice, the words that you might use, then there's this disconnect between what could be and what is. And the clients will then feel like this is a bit more risky than we thought and take a step back. So we need that to be matched up. So spending some time really thinking about how you are going to turn up into that space, how you are going to confidently own that room without taking over the space, still leaving space for this conversation, is really, really critical. And I would say is probably the number one thing that my clients don't think about before we start working together. So today we have talked about the 3 most common mistakes that I see entrepreneurs make when they are pitching. And as I said, that could be pitching a piece of business. It could be pitching for a large contract. It could be doing a networking pitch. It's all the same. We need to start with the heart. So we need to start with stories. And I love Brené Brown's quotation that stories are simply data with soul. And that's so important. A story is data. It's telling it, look, this is what happened, beginning, middle, and end. It's data. But it's doing it in such a way that it's engaging for our listeners. Using sensory language to describe those stories or to describe the status quo for the client. Because when we start with status quo, we're saying to the client, I see you. I see you in this situation. I see you in this problem, and I can support you through it. I can get you to the other side. Now, once we've started with the heart and we've told our stories, then that's when we get to lean on the logic. That's when we can use evidence. We can use case studies. We can use testimonials. We can use empirical data to support the story, because they've started to care at that stage, because they've listened to the story, they've engaged with the story, we've used our sensory language to evoke an emotional response. And now we're saying, look, this is the data. This is how we can support you. This is the evidence that we have that what we do turns out well for our clients. And then we really need to spend as much time on the how we're going to present as the what we're going to present. I see so often clients and companies finishing presentations, say, the night before they're about to go and pitch. So they've been working on the what for a really, really long time, but they haven't been thinking about how they're going to turn up into that space and their intention for that space. So they've not thought about posture, body language, breathing, gesture, intonation, pace and pause, and all the things that will sell themselves and then therefore sell their product or their service. So spend as much time thinking about how you're going to present as to what you're going to present. Because if they buy into you, they're much more likely to buy into your service. Make sure you start with them. Start with where they are. Start with their problems. Start with their issues. What do you understand about that? How does that fit into the general marketplace? How does that fit into a global marketplace? What do you see as the consequences if nothing changes and they continue on the path that they're on? How is that going to turn out? Paint that status quo picture for them, because that's demonstrating insight into the future and potential foresight for them. And then show them you can help. Show them how your processes have helped other people. Show them how you have supported other clients. And finally, make sure you finish with a clear call to action. What do you want to happen next? Now, that might change. The client they may have other things that need to happen first, but make sure that you are stating what you would like to happen next. So I trust that you have found today really super useful. You've got 3 very clear things to look for when you are creating a pitch or a presentation in the future. And my call to action to you is subscribe to this YouTube channel. Come be part of our environment. We post these kinds of videos once a week and a short video as well. They are filled with value. They are filled with information. So please subscribe to our channel. Come be part of our community and learn absolutely masses about presenting, communicating and connecting with other human beings. Take care, and I'll speak to you very soon. Bye now.